Good morning, councillors and public. Welcome to the Environment and Community Committee meeting of the Toowoomba Regional Council. This meeting is open to the public and will also be live streamed. I would like to thank all those of you who are in the room with us today and acknowledge everyone watching via Council's social media channels. I also remind councillors to click Join the Meeting on Broadview. I acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today. The Western Waka Waka people, the Gayarabal, Jarowaha peoples, and pay respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, the rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's first people. Apologies. Today we have an apology from Councillor Carol Taylor. I need a motion to that effect, please. Everyone's got their hands up. Councillor Bill and seconded by Councillor Tim. All those in favour, please. Thank you. Also an apology from Councillor Edwina Farquhar. Would somebody like to move Mayor Jeff and Deputy Mayor Rebecca? All those in favour? Thank you. So it's been, both motions have been passed unanimously. Going on, is there any prescribed declaration of interest? No, there's been nil advised, just giving anybody an opportunity, and any declaration of declarable conflict of interest. There's been nil advised and no one's going on with that, so that's all good. So we do go to the parking amendment, subordinate law number 1 for 2024. The author of that is Ron O'Driscoll. And also, before we go on with that, I'd like to welcome to technically the stage here, we've got Acting CEO Nick, and we've got Hugh, Rowan and Paul. So they're the wisdom behind all this. So any questions obviously will be directed to them regarding the proposed motion. So the motion that will be displayed is to proceed with making of or make parking amendment subordinate local law number 1, 2024 as advertised as attachment 1 and 2 to adopt pursuant to section 32 of the Local Government Act 2009, a consolidated version of subordinate local law number 5, parking 2011 attachment 2. So I'll hand over to Hugh and he'll run through a few facts and figures.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to acknowledge Rowan, who is our Manager of Environment and Regulatory Services. It's in fact his first council meeting today. Rowan's been with us since July and has hit the ground running, and I'll hand over to Rowan as the author of the report to introduce it to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Hugh. So just to introduce the report, we're here today, or Council's here today to decide with proceeding to make the local law, which is step 6 in our local lawmaking process. So in the May council meeting, we proposed to make the local law, and today's decision is informed by community consultation, which is the formal part of the local lawmaking process. So in terms of the community consultation, we did an extensive community consultation. We're legally bound to provide advertising in the local paper, but we went above and beyond that and did some social media posts, both on Facebook and LinkedIn, which received good viewership, and on Council's external facing website as well. We received 2 public submissions, properly made public submissions with respect to that, both in favour of the making of that local law. One specifically had some really good points from a strategy perspective, which has been passed on to the relevant area of council. and some with just understanding the technicalities of what the mapping in that proposed local law is and the changes to it. So, for example, Mothercraft Lane is technically not a road, so we can't enforce on it. So it is mapped that way because it is a property. So this gives us the head of power to enforce there. So that submission was noted and some good points, but so it's essentially a technicality regarding some of those reasons that they're mapped in the local law. Although when you're on the road, it does look and feel like a road and general parking. So I'll take on that. I'll ask for any questions through the chair.
Can I start off then? I'll go to Councillor Carey. With the consultation, how many actual responses did we get, both positive and negative?
So 2 total made proper submissions and both positive. We did have a further inquiry from a community group regarding the local lawmaking process, but they were just wanting to understand the process, so we provided them the May report and they were satisfied with that.
To me, as a layperson, so to speak, that number seems really, really low, or there wasn't much engagement in or interest in it.
Typically, I can't speak to having done it at Toowoomba before, but other local laws, that's probably pretty standard for community consultation. And as I spoke to, we did go above and beyond in our community consultation. There was, I won't say extensive, but there was definite genuine engagement with those posts and viewership around. I couldn't tell you the numbers off the top of my head, but in terms of attending that the Have Your Say page, there was good viewership there. But obviously, people decided not to make a submission. So,
thanks, Rowan. Councillor Carey.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Rowan. Welcome to the committee meeting, and I hope you enjoy your day today and many days into the future.
okay.
Just 2 questions. One, the submission, I noticed the names have been blanked out. Is that a normal, acting CEO might know the answer to that. Is that a normal procedure?
Happy to take that question. Good morning, councillors. Yes, these are public documents, so for the purposes of protecting the private information of those people, those names are redacted just for the purpose of this meeting.
Okay, thank you. My substantive question, though, is that the increase is quite substantial from 60, for example, failing to pay from $61 to $100. I'm just wondering for how long that $61 fee was in operation, for how many years since we've increased it.
Since 2011, roughly. That is, yeah.
Councillor Tim.
Thanks, Chair. Morning, Hugh. Morning, Rowan. Good to see you. $100 proposed. You might have to convince me a little bit on that one. And can I just give my reasoning? So that's putting us in line with Gold Coast, Logan, etc., which I suppose is the same percentage of a penalty unit and is therefore what we're trying to do anyway. But those cities, I would propose, are different story to us. Now, I haven't parked ever in the Logan CBD, but are they 1 hour? Are they a smaller CBD like we are? Gold Coast, where it has I'll use the word plethora of other public transport options to get into Surfers Paradise, is it still the same demand on car spaces? And the final part of my question, at $66, that's still enough for me to get home and say to my wife, oh, I've got a $65 parking ticket. It's still a sufficient deterrent. Is it going to deter people more by changing it to $100? So I suppose I just would love to have a conversation about those rates and your. I know there was a lot of questions there, but your answers, if you have them. Thanks.
I guess and some of the information is anecdotal. I'll acknowledge that, but the The increase in the rate is around changing the behaviour. So as I said, it is anecdotally, but the conversations officers have is that people are happy to run the risk of not paying for parking because essentially, unless they get caught a couple of times a week, they're probably saving money on the parking fees. So it's really around changing the behaviour and encouraging the payment of the regulated parking.
Can I just follow that up? And acknowledging it might be a good question for the ISG team, but there seems to be a little bit of public scrutiny around we're free at present for the first half hour, but you've still got to put it in the parking meter, and a lot of people don't know that, and you get the app, and we've had a little bit of media coverage about inadequacies. The app doesn't work and all of that. So I would sort of like to propose we should have all of those issues ironed out before we go to this. To your knowledge, have those issues been resolved? Is the public on board with the intricacies of our app and it's perhaps early days teething problems?
Not to speak for the whole public, but in terms of the number of people that do park in the CBD and use the app, there's a high percentage that are able to or understand that they still need to register with a parking bay or through, whether it's a parking bay or through the app. There is a small percentage who probably don't understand that, but I would say it is a small percentage of the interactions we have where people don't understand that.
Yeah, no, thanks. I don't have any more questions, but just to say the many thousands of visitors that come to this region in September, my anecdotal feedback is that they're probably not familiar with the intricacies of our parking app. And when you're new to town, you probably don't have the understanding that a regular park like all of us does. So anyway, thank you for answering that.
Councillor Bill.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, on the subject of passing a local law to raise the level of fines, I note with interest the one of the submissions, and I would take them as speaking from a visitor's point of view. And I recall with not so fond memory in a previous term where we had a gentleman say to us that he was quite happy to pay the fines because they were so cheap, and that was in a loading zone, to come here and do his business for the day. I think this is a very positive move, and I think I also note that the likeness that we have with other areas is that the real estate in a city centre is extremely valuable, and I think, you know, this is a positive step towards ensuring that everyone has equity of access, both visitors and regulars, residents that frequent to do their business. At the appropriate time, I'm happy to move this, Chair, if there's no more questions.
Councillor Gary.
So this increase is only the city centre, it's not like out of Coney Springs and...
No, sorry, it's everywhere. It's for the local government area.
So it's Mothers Park and when there's not enough parks at the sports fields.
If that's a regulation,
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I don't think that's a bit of our responsibility because we don't have enough parks.
That's, I guess, from an enforcement perspective. We obviously have discretion when we do enforce, and there's was a notice of motion at the last council meeting regarding enforcement policy, and we will workshop that further. In terms of the number of parks, is probably not something I can talk to. I'm more an asset owner.
Because I don't think, you know, mothers at sports day in the afternoon, Friday afternoons, are parking on the grass because they're trying to get out of paying a parking fee or a thing. You know, I'd be fine if it was the city centre, but I don't see, they don't have much option out there. And I think $60 is a lot of money today for families, let alone 100. Yeah.
I'll hand over to Acting CEO Nick.
Just want to try and provide a little bit of clarity about that. And Rowan, I might ask you to start thinking about what offence would be committed in the example provided by Councillor Gardner, where someone's parked illegally or unlawfully at a sporting facility. The fines that we're talking about here are for failing to pay, and so you don't pay for parking at Carney Springs. It's only in the CBD where there's metered parking. So that's the one that's currently $61 going to $100, so it's not relevant in the circumstance. Overstaying in a space is $77 to $100 in the circumstance, and the other infringements there are not relevant either. So are we increasing the fee for unlawful parking in suburban areas, I guess?
Yes, so there is other changes. These are the I guess displayed ones that were the most frequent issued infringements. So there is changes to footpath parking. However, there's I guess I can talk to the intent of that legislation if needed. But as I said, that would be workshopped at a compliance and enforcement policy council workshop. But yes, to answer the question, there is changes to that as well.
I'll just ask a question as chair. Income from the last year, one of our learned friends around here must know, maybe Anne-Marie with finance. What was the income generated from parking fines last financial year? And what is
just over 1.2 million.
1.2 million. And has there been any projected figures with the same scenarios with what the new fines would bring in?
Sorry, so no, we don't have an estimate of what the new fines would bring. The intent would be to change the behaviour. I probably can't talk to that. It may end up being static if the infringement amount changes behaviour. Naturally, you'd see less infringements issued, but that's conjecture.
Councillor Bill and then Councillor Gary.
So, Chair, through you, Rowan, or any of the officers, would I be incorrect in assuming that the situation that Councillor Gardner refers to is regulated almost totally on a reactive basis? In other words, when people are repetitively doing the wrong thing and someone in the neighbourhood complains about illegal parking on footpaths, that's a reactive approach. I would assume that we don't have the resources to actively police suburbia and sporting facilities in adjacent areas. It's on a reactive complaints basis. Whereas the stuff that you've highlighted in the report here is a proactive approach in the city centre, particularly where, as I said, real estate is valuable and accessibility and equity of accessibility is of a premium. So that's where you proactively do police this from a compliance perspective. That's been my understanding in the past and when I was previously involved in this portfolio. The other stuff is totally based on people who are fed up with people doing the wrong thing on their footpath or blocking them from getting out their driveway or can't get access to street because inappropriately parked. Is that a fair assumption?
Yes, absolutely. So anything in the CBD area is we do proactive approaches, but outside the CBD area, there's no proactive patrols. It's all complaint basis, reactive.
Councillor Gary Gardner.
So the Kearney Spring fines are going to go to 100 too, is that correct?
Yeah. Sorry, footpath parking, do you know? So footpath parking is currently 64 and will go to 129.
129, double, okay. But I'd say it's more than reactive because I've had utes find they're in Ruffin Street on the road. There's not in front of any houses or, in Kearney Springs, it's on council land. It's not in front of houses. So I'd argue it's not always reactive. I think sometimes they're out there at, like some of them are caught to 6 at night, they're walking down the footpath finding everyone they can. So I disagree with it being reactive.
I'll hand over to Mayor Jeff.
Thanks very much, Chair. Rowan, welcome. First one. Not an easy one either, I've got to be honest with you.
That's all right.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Good on you. Just and you cited your previous experience with feedback and what have you, how this has come to before you're at Toowoomba Regional Council. On the parking amendment subordinate local law, which is attachment 1, page 10, it may need a little bit of explanation in regard to the greatest feedback. Certainly, I'm hearing is around the 2 feet on the footpath, 2 wheels on the footpath, parking that way, and often the reason is because of safety. There's not enough room. It might be a 1 carriageway street, and difficult for trucks to get through, other cars to get through, what have you. I'd just be interested in your view on the third one from the bottom. Well, actually, even the one above that, it talks about parallel parking. And parking on a 2-way road other than parallel is nearest practical to the far left side of the road. So that stays on the road, not the footpath, and that's a 0.5 penalty if you're not. So I'm assuming that if you're on the footpath, it'll be a 0.5 penalty. If you're doing what you are to do, then there's no penalty. The one below it then is where it probably gets a little bit confusing in regard to parking within 3 metres of a continuous dividing line or dividing strip unless permitted by a sign. A lot of these are, and they may be 2-way, with a dividing strip in the middle, but it still is very tight. The streets, they're building streets narrow in some areas and wider in others, and some of these are difficult to get through. I just wonder whether that's more of a conversation for us to have. I assume this is the state transport operations. That's the rules that's set by the state. Local governments, do they have an opportunity to bespoke that in any way, given the widths of roads, or they may not have a line up the middle? Does local government have the capacity to actually have their own local law in regard to that?
Yes, correct. It is a state law, which is a national model law as well, adopted by all states. Councils have the ability, I guess, from a policy perspective and a discretionary perspective on how we enforce. It wouldn't be, a local law in contention with a state law is probably not something I would I've dealt with or wanted or had to adopt before, but it's something that, as I mentioned at the last council meeting, there's a resolution regarding drafting a compliance enforcement policy, and we'll workshop that with council. And that's probably the mechanism for the ability to have an approach to those specifics.
That's great, Rowan. I do appreciate that. That's probably the area of most contention that I hear of, particularly in some of our smaller streets, narrower streets in suburbia, where there just is not the capacity to pass if you've got one car on either side. So I look forward to that when it comes. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Jeff. Just a comment. I think we've got the cart before the horse here. We need to sort out what Mayor Jeff was saying regarding parking, 2 wheels on grass verges, all that type of stuff. We need to sort out inner city parking first and getting time schedules all aligned before we come in and increase fines. That's just my personal opinion on this. Are there any other further questions from the floor? Councillor Gardner?
Yeah. Well, I feel it should be city should be separate to out in the suburbs, you might call it, because we don't have public transport, and you got no option but to drive, and to get hit $100 or 129 is a lot of money for people, especially in today's. So I can't vote for this. So.
Councillor Bill, do you want to propose the motion that you were?
I'd like to move the motion, and this is a uniform basis for which these guys to apply compliance, and we've heard there are some steps that we will take in order to how that compliance is rolled out in different areas of the city and region.
And we've got Councillor James O'Shea to second that motion. Anybody want to Okay, we'll put the motion. It's moved by councillor Kale and seconded by councillor Shea.
Sorry, Chair, you may offer the opportunity to debate. It sounds like potentially councillor Gary might like to debate this.
Okay.
So that's, if we go into debate, then councillor Carl can
Okay.
speak
Anybody want to
first or
vote
reserve his right.
against that motion? It will be up on the board there. Okay, Gary's had his, councillor, do you like to closing words for the motion?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Look, this is a normal process that we need to follow around making and amending local laws and subordinate local laws. So it's a process we don't have any flexibility on. So this is, as I've suggested, a natural step in how we go about uniformly regulating and handling compliance matters. I've also said that there will never ever be any other approach, in my view, of a proactive city centre approach, which is based on the critical accessibility and equity around accessibility for people to park. And particularly, I raised an example around visitors and how cheap they thought it was to illegally park and make it difficult for others, particularly in loading zones where businesses need goods and services to be provided to their business houses. This is a classic example, councillors, and I cannot miss the opportunity to remind us all here of how this is at the end of the funnel, this discussion. We're having a discussion here based on, and it's been very appropriately raised by the Mayor, around narrow streets and design. I remind councillors, when the lobby comes around the PSP engineering standards for widths of road and footpath verge, and the need in those narrow streets to park two wheels so people can gain access to their properties down that street, this is why we need to hold the line on not narrowing these verges, these public verges, so that we don't deal with what I call the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. These guys here and a reoccurring operational expenditure to police poor planning. That's exactly, there's nothing else, no other way that I see of putting this. So we are where we are, and this is a local law that uniformly and equitably treats people the same without any privileges. Parking on the footpath is parking on the footpath. We've heard from the officers, there is an ability for us to be able to workshop this and give some direction around how we treat with discretion compliance matters. But I would say to not overcomplicate the process, stick to the legal and lawful way about in which we go about making local laws and amending local laws. And I urge you to support this so they have some uniformity in the way, or it treats people fairly. But under the guise of, it will only ever be acted on by officers as they get complaints. So I urge you to support it, colleagues, and enable our officers to do their job effectively.
Any speakers against the motion? Councillor Gary Gardner.
Yeah, well, I can't support $129 fine for people parking out in the suburbs. Like I say, we're not the Gold Coast or Brisbane, or we don't have public transport. They've got no option. And we keep talking about visitors taken. I think you find that probably only happens at Carnival Flowers. So, to, overreact when to me, we always seem to want to change laws when we get one extreme, we get one thing happen, then we want to change the law. You forget about the other. For every one that does the wrong thing, you get 1,000 that do the right thing. And we seem to always want to change the laws for the one that does the wrong thing. And to me, I'm happy to put the fees up in city CBD to 129 because that's people have got choices, but not out in the sports fields and the suburbs. So I'll be voting against it.
Councillor James O'Shea for the motion.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm happy to speak in favour of this motion. And Councillor Gardner, I understand and agree the point of view of where you're coming from, to be honest, in terms of equity across different areas. But I think what we really need to remember with this is parking's everyone's favourite topic. The general public, media, us, everyone's got the right answer. Everyone knows what the problem is and everyone will give you a different indication of how it should be fixed. Let's not confuse what this report is actually about. So this is a subordinate local law. And as Councillor Gary mentioned before, for the one person that's doing wrong, there's 1,000 that are doing the right thing. So you know how much the 1,000 doing the right thing, how much their fee is going to increase? Zero. It's going to stay at zero. Because at the end of the day, you're following the rules. You don't get fined one bit, right? So I just want to break it back down and just remember what this is in place for. Well, Councillor Carl raised a few points around this before, and he used an example, and that's a very true one. Going back, it was in my first term anyway, it was around 2016, there had a bit of construction around here. There was, in a particular area where contractors were parking not only in parking spots, they were parking in loading zones. And the reason they gave was they said, well, $60 a day is cheap parking and we don't get caught every day. So they said that's fine. They purposely parked there because the fine was so cheap that it was good business sense to them. So that obviously suggests to me that, okay, that the system isn't quite right there. So, the fine has to fit the crime. We mightn't have the exact perfect right balance at the moment around enforcement in certain areas that you referred to before, like Carney Springs, 2 wheels up, all of these certain scenarios. I'm not saying that that's a perfect system, even 2 hours to 1 hour, just the whole parking system that we had, is it perfect right now? No. Will it ever be perfect? No. But again, when I say coming back to remembering what this report's about, the opportunity around, if there are certain areas that we wish to change the conditions of parking around 2 wheels up, around parking at, the example you referred to there before around in Carney Springs, the opportunity to do that, as the manager Rowan has mentioned there before, is obviously in that session that's coming up, which there was a motion put forward, I believe, last month to be able to try and change that. That's the time to change those things. Now's not the time to debate around who's getting fined where, whether 2 wheels up is or isn't the right motion, whether 2 hours is the right thing, whether we've got our parking system in order. This is just literally around the fees that are associated with a subordinate local law. That's what it's about. So I just think it's really, really important not to get it all mixed up into the one area, because there is opportunities around that. And as I said, I agree. I think there's certain areas around there that we can look at changing and making a better equitable outcome for community. Firmly believe that. So I agree with you. I agree with the points that have been raised in opposition to this. But again, as I said, I think and feel that we get that chance to do that when we go through that briefing session, which is coming up, which was already put on the books by a resolution. So, and I think we need to remember as well, the important thing about this, this is coming into place. It's not a revenue raising practice. Seriously, if council wanted to revenue raise around parking, we could do it. That 1.2, I reckon I could turn into 10. We just need a lot more officers, and we walk around and we'd find people all day, every day. Seriously, that's the truth. And we all know that. That's reality. That's the way it is. So it's certainly not a revenue raising activity.
And as Councillor Carl raised his question before, it is outside of the CBD. It is a reactive surface. That is what it is, because that's just the way it works. Like I say to people with road rules, it says 60 kilometres an hour. Every time you drive over 60, have you always been fined? How often do you reckon every time you've driven over 60 have you been fined? What percent? Like rules, we need to put these things in place around to try and provide the most equitable outcome. And I think this is an opportunity for us to do so. All the other questions around the use of the app, all the other questions around 2 wheels up, all the other questions around which certain areas should or shouldn't be fined or should have lenience or should be creating different local laws, that all has to come as that next phase, which we get that opportunity to do through that info session. So I support the motion as the officers have put forward for those reasons. And again, I stress, this is a subordinate local law. The opportunity for change and opportunity for different opinions and ideas moving forward around what future parking looks like, that's the next step. So that's why I support it. Thanks, Chair.
Are there any people wanting to speak against the motion? Councillor Carey, Shine.
Yeah, no, thanks, thanks, Chair. I must say I was persuaded by Councillor Gardner's arguments and also impressed by Councillor O'Shea's contribution as well. It just seems to me that you mentioned before putting the horse before the cart, and I think that's right here, that we probably should have that information session and work out what's the best way of approaching that dilemma. What Councillor Gardner says is right. In terms of Carney Springs, if the council doesn't provide parking spaces, what else are people to do? If you go to Grammar Downlands Day, are you seriously going to prosecute people for parking on the footpaths outside those schools or other sporting events throughout the city? So these are the sort of things I think that we should be a little bit more concerned about and give it proper consideration, because if we don't, what we're going to do is to substantially raise the fine for those sort of people who might be have a ticket outside Carney Springs. And just amazing that if Councillor Gardner was referring to actually what has happened is in his experience that council officers have been booking people after hours in those sort of places. That's not, I wouldn't have thought, within the spirit of what council really wants to see happen in those instances. So from my point of view, I think we need to do a little bit more work on it and then postpone this to later in the year.
Any further debate? Anybody for the motion? I will put the motion. Councillor O'Shea wants to ask a question.
With your indulgence, Chair, thank you. Can I ask a question through you? I just want clarity around the statement that's been made about that we have officers going out after hours looking to find people. Can I understand can I ground truth that, please?
Through you, Chair. We do have officers who work on weekends, and depending on what the complaint is, if the complaint is that someone is parking here from 6 p.m. to whenever and I can't get into my drive, from time to time we will do after hours work, but it would be in relation to that complaint. So no, we don't have officers scheduled from 5 to 9 p.m. doing patrols proactively. It would be informed by the complaint. And in terms of sporting fields and stuff, that would also be complaint basis. We do have officers working on weekends, and if we attend sporting events, it's at due to complaints as well.
Anybody want to speak for the motion? I think we had it against. Anyone for the motion? We will put the motion then. Councillor Bill, to sum up before the motion is put.
Thanks, Councillor James. You raised some really good points, and thanks for your question to Rowan to clarify that. As I said, council definitely does not have the resources to proactively activate compliance. What I said before is this is enabling officers to help change behaviour for the minority that choose to do the wrong thing. And usually they're bad enough because it's a reactive to a complaint. We've got to think here that if there's an emergency in a street and an ambulance vehicle cannot gain access because people are doing the wrong thing, that's a pretty serious situation. So this is about changing behaviours. And I just say that if you look at the examples the officers given here, regardless of what you think the city is, whether it's like the Toowoomba region or not, the commonality for us all here is around equity of access for everyone in those critical spots. And the only proactive area is in the CBD that this is enforced. So I urge you to support this, enable our officers. This is a positive step for us to move forward in actually putting the microscope across how this is rolled out across the area, the region. And I think it's a sensible, logical step. I absolutely disagree with it being out of sequence. The officers to date, with the minimalist fines we have operated very professionally, both proactively and reactively. And I empathise with these officers because I do recall times when there's been a criminal offence committed against our officers with people spitting on them and all sorts of things. So, you know, we need to enable the organisation to be able to do their job, apply some uniformity and equity around how compliance is rolled out. And they've very openly, under the direction of council, said we will come back to you on how we might have a bespoke, quoting the Mayor, approach to these matters. So I urge you, councillors, to support and enable our organisation to do their job. And from a workplace health and safety perspective, you know, a deterrent such as a meaningful fine rather than subjecting officers to all sorts of things without placing a value on people, the majority of people doing the right thing, we might just avoid some very unsavoury behaviour that our officers have to put up with, or minimise that at least. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Cale.
Chair,
Just the Mayor.
I just want to foreshadow a motion if this motion is lost, if I could. And that would be simply that a decision on this matter is deferred until the review of the car parking strategy and workshop around other car parking initiatives across the region takes place. That's foreshadowed if this is lost.
Okay, thank you. So we will go ahead and put the motion to the councillors. All those in favour of the motion that is up on the board? So raise your hands high. 1, 2, 3. Against? Just getting these numbers recorded. Okay, I'll hand back to Mayor Jeff with the foreshadowed motion.
Thanks, Dan. Just, I'm not sure if you've got that, but paraphrasing now, that this matter is deferred until after the car parking strategy is reviewed and a further workshop in regard to car parking more generally across the region.
just a question from Hugh. Is that the compliant?
Could I clarify, Mr. Mayor, are you referring to the compliance enforcement strategy that was,
That's the strategy?
yeah, rather
that the
than
one?
the car park?
Oh, no, there's two elements.
Yep,
There's
okay.
there's a review of the car parking strategy, and there's that one that Rowan mentioned earlier, review of the compliance and enforcement.
So we're just working on that motion to come up on the screen, so it's available for everyone to see. Hugh Dunn would like to say a few words.
So if I could just clarify for the room, and I might ask our subject matter experts, in relation to the making of the local law, would this mean that the local law process starts from the start again, or could it be deferred? Could the decision be deferred until a point in the future?
Yeah, my understanding, and Paul may be able to inform me further, that if we're deferring the decision, then that's fine. If we were proposing to make amendments, we do somewhat start the process again. But if we defer the decision, it would just sit idle for now.
Deputy Mayor Rebecca Vonoff.
Thanks, Chair. Through you to the Acting CEO, can we have some clarity, Nick? Because on a point of order, this motion there has been a decision on this motion. The matter was just defeated. So the foreshadowed motion that this decision be deferred is moot because the decision was just defeated.
Yeah, no, the clarity, if I could, through the chair, is that it needed some reasons not to, and this then circumnavigates the reasons because it specifically says after the car park strategy and the workshop regarding. Otherwise, there's nothing that says what we're doing it for.
Through you again, I don't know if that's the case. If we do actually need reasons, have we not received legal advice that the will of the council is reason enough?
I'll hand over to Acting CEO Nick.
The motion was that council proceed with the making of, and you've not decided to do that. So you're making a new decision, or you've not made a decision at all. You didn't make a decision not to proceed, you just didn't make a decision to proceed. So the next decision, I think, stands up.
So we do have that new motion, which is on the screen, proposed by Mayor Jeff, seconded by Councillor Kerry Shine. Debate. Anyone? Sorry, Councillor Cale.
Just through you, Chair, to the officers, just thinking about the stakeholders involved in that review and the timing of this, do you guys, I realise you're at the end of the food chain here, but do you have any idea what the timing of this, when it'll come back to council, subject to these?
With respect to the compliance and enforcement policy, we were proposing around a council information session probably the end of November, but that would be in a very draft form. In terms of if we were to adopt a formal policy, we would be sometime in the new year. In terms of the car parking strategy, I cannot give a date. ISG are leading that. I don't have a date for when that would be formalised or complete.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. It's a pity we don't have, and I totally respect your response, Ron. That's out of your hands. It'd be nice to know how long that strategy review would take.
Yeah, I can tell you that I think they've done a review of the existing strategy, and then that's going through consultation with officers at the moment prior to any drafting of new strategy. So I wouldn't think it's anything you'd see this year, but I'm speaking out of turn there. I don't speak on behalf of ISG, but that's just some information I have.
Thank you.
Okay, we do have the motion up on the board there, proposed by Mayor Jeff. Oh, it's not on the board yet? It's coming up shortly. I can't see the board from where I'm sitting, so. Okay, is it up? Okay, the motion is proposed by Mayor Jeff, I believe was seconded by Councillor Kerry Shine, that the decision on this matter is deferred until the review of the car park strategy and the further workshop regarding development of a compliance and enforcement policy. Any debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour of that motion? Hands up. Against? So it's probably easier that way. So motion is carried. So that ends the parking subordinate local law. We will carry on now with the youth strategy 2025 to 2030, connect, create and activate. The author of this is Louise Byers, and we're changing seats now for this to all to happen. So we've got Lisa up here and we've also got Beck. So I'll hand over to the motion that is on the board now would be that Council endorse the Youth Strategy 2025-2030 Connect, Create, Activate, Attachment 1 and Associated Youth Action Plan 2025-2030 Attachment 2 for the purpose of guiding and prioritising councils' efforts and advocacy to engage young people across the Toowoomba region. I'll hand over to Lisa just for a bit of a...
Yeah. Good morning, councillors. The Connect, Create and Activate Youth Strategy 2025 to 2030 is Council's second youth strategy and is a continuation from the Engaged and Active Youth Strategy from 2019 to 2021. The proposed youth strategy has been developed through long-term consultation with young people, the community and the youth sector, through ongoing program delivery, survey data collection, the Youth Leaders Program, which has seen over 100 young people through the program since 2019, and continuing collaboration with the sector, including the RIAC, the GDLLA and Youth Interagency Networks, as well as the youth sector survey we completed in 2023. From these ongoing connections and consultations, the strategy has been structured around 4 interlinked goals: inclusion and participation, connection and well-being, experiences and diversity, and services and support systems. When endorsed, the strategy will provide strategic direction for how Council will continue to engage with the region's young people, the youth sector and other tiers of government to ensure a connected, creative region where young people actively shape the future.
Thank you, Lisa, and also welcome to your first time at committee. Also noting we have Darryl Bates and Paul Reynolds in the room in their respective roles, as well as Beck Schroeder. So if we take the report as read and request any questions if required.
Are there any questions from the floor before I ask somebody to move the motion? Mayor Jeff.
Thanks, Chair. Through you, just a comment, I guess. Thank you, Lisa, Rebecca. It's your first time presenting, Lisa. Yeah, I was going to say.
On Youth Leaders, but yeah, first time in the live streamed.
In the live stream,
yeah.
Okay, great, well done. Your little one will be happy to watch this back. No, thank you. I guess the thing with strategies is that you like to measure how they've gone in the past, and given the fact that 1921 was during a COVID time, the report that talks about attachment 4, which gives you the status report, I just wouldn't mind a comment on that, because you've achieved quite a lot in all of those areas. In fact, the only couple that are outside of that, one which I think is a wonderful initiative to take up on, is around having a Youth Leaders alumni group, because we've been going now for, how long have we been going now? 10 years? A decade?
Yeah, it's 10 years this year, since 2015.
And it's always a real thrill to see alumni from the youth leaders excelling in their field, whatever that may be. And I often, as many councillors would, interact with those at that level that they're working at. I would think that would be a terrific program if it could happen, and I note the reasons why. But I think that's only one of a couple that weren't achieved in that time. So it was a realistic strategy. This one also looks realistic and achievable, but it also has the key focus on making sure we have an actively engaged youth. When you think of those 10 years, the ones that have gone through there, by and large, they're all contributing, and in a way that they never thought they would have achieved or contributed had it not been for youth leaders. So, that's a credit to the program and to you. So thank you. I appreciate it. And I just wanted to highlight the status and the summary of what's been achieved, and look forward to seeing this one in 4 years' time as well. Good on you. Thanks.
Thanks, Mayor Jeff. Councillor James O'Shea.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Look, I'm just happy to move it if there aren't any further questions, and with your indulgence, just a quick comment. So if there are no other questions, if you're happy for me to proceed, I'm happy to move it. Can I commend obviously the staff that have been involved in this? So obviously Lisa, Beck, Daryl, and the team that's put this together. But also, I want to highlight Mayor Jeff. This is the second version of this, but it was actually an initiative that you started back in 2016. So, and it was such an important one, and obviously for a council of this size to not have an actual youth strategy was a real opportunity. And as we've seen so many opportunities that develop from this, but obviously key targets and metrics that obviously we can really benefit from. So I think there's never been a more important time to actively engage our youth. When we look at the cycle of Toowoomba Regional Council, I said we're approaching a time where the first group of young adults that will have lived an entire life in an amalgamated council, so they being obviously the constituents of the future, and obviously our leaders of the future in whatever field they choose. There's never been a more crucial or critical time to have that engagement with youth. So through this strategy, we are able to obviously achieve a lot of that, and likewise look forward to seeing the future and where we take it from here through so many people, that not just through council, but obviously the active participation for people through RIAC. Our Youth Advisory Committee is something that has been at a very high standard, and that shows the engagement of youth. So I think we'll see that again. So thank you to everyone that's been involved in it. Look forward to what we can see in the coming years. And with those words, Chair, I'm happy to move the report.
Thank you. Councillor Tim McMahon, you...
Oh, look, I was just going to endorse it and say great report. Thank you very much. This is
maybe your
important,
chance
though.
to second
I was
the motion.
happy to second it, but keeping in mind I didn't make the cut for the Youth Advisory Committee this term, so perhaps Councillor Gardner in his role may like to second it.
Councillor Gary Gardner is going to second that motion. Before we put the motion, as a new councillor on board here, and the work that you and Lisa and Beck and the whole group make is so important, and particularly to the regions. I've seen what you do in the regions, and it's totally taken on board in the region, so keep up the good work. I'll put the motion. All those in favour of the motion which is on the board? Carried unanimously. So that will end this meeting. Conclusion of the meeting is 10 o'clock. Thank you for attendance and your deliberations.
to chair the Corporate Services Committee. That's the first item. Councillor Rebecca.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to nominate Councillor O'Shea.
Councillor O'Shea, accept that nomination. Okay, we'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll now proceed with a special today, the first time under the new title of Corporate Services. So a historic meeting for this branch. So a big thank you to everyone involved, of course, in the change there, and obviously the feedback from the staff as well. And I'd like to welcome the acting CEO, Nick Hauser, the Corporate Service, nearly went back to old habits, finance and business strategy, the Corporate Services General Manager, Anne-Marie Johnson. We've got Andrew Wegner with us here as well. And a big thank you to Deanne as well, who does an amazing job here, obviously keeping everything running. So thank you to you for your contribution here today as well. Just in opening the meeting today, I'd also probably like to take this opportunity. I might take a leaf out of the Mayor's book in terms of values, moments, and we've just seen the conclusion of the Toowoomba Carnival of Flowers, and we've seen with that so many people that have volunteered their time to help make the event what it was. So I think you'll find once it's all tallied up, there'll be thousands of hours of volunteer time that was contributed to this event. And I particularly want to highlight that because the amount of Toowoomba Regional Council staff that volunteered their time at different events, and I'm sure many of those of you around the table that went to different events, you would have seen different staff members volunteering. So I think that's a wonderful contribution from our staff to be involved in such a signature event as that. And it's great that they choose and want to be a part of that event. So I thought it was an opportune time to highlight that. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll go to the first item on the agenda. So I'd like to acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse the lands that we do meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, Gibel and Jarrawa peoples, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's first people. Item number 2, councillors, is attendance, including apologies, leave of absence and declaration of conflicts of interest. And remiss of me as well to acknowledge Mayor Jeff McDonald, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Rebecca Von Hoff and councillors today as well. Councillors, we do have an apology for Councillor Carol Taylor. So a motion that the apology for Councillor Taylor be accepted. Moved by Councillor Von Hoff, seconded by Councillor Manteifel. Those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Councillors, we also have a motion for an apology from Councillor Edwina Farquhar. So an apology that her non-attendance be accepted. Can I ask for a mover of that? Moved by Mayor McDonald, seconded by Councillor Manteifel. All those in favour? It's carried. And we also note the leave of absence of Councillor Melissa Taylor. So, councillors, we'll go to item number 3 on the agenda. So it is the derivative policy and investment policy. Andrew Wegner is the author of this report. Anne-Marie, do you have any opening remarks, or we'll hand directly to Andrew? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, councillors. So at item 3, we're looking at the review of the derivative policy and investment policy. We're looking to seek adoption of the proposed amendments to 2.85 derivative policy and 2.61 investment policy. Both of these have incorporated minor amendments associated with the latest corporate plan. These can be found at attachment 1 and attachment 3 with track changes for ease of reading. Taking a look at the risk matters, both the derivative investment policy align with the risk appetite statement with a moderate risk appetite for financial management. And I'll hand over to questions.
Thanks, Andrew. Any questions, councillors, in regards to this item? If there are no questions in regards to this item, we do have a recommendation, and that is the one that council adopts the updated 2.85 derivative policy, attachment 2. And the second part of that motion is council adopts the adopted 2.61 investment policy. Do we have a mover for that motion? Moved by Councillor Carl, seconded by Councillor McMahon. Anyone wish to go into debate? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thanks, Andrew. That takes us to item number 4 on the agenda, and it is a request for sponsorship, Meat Stock Toowoomba 2025. I'll ask Anthony. Yep, sorry.
And good morning, Councillor. So just some opening comments in relation to this report coming from the Corporate Services Group. We, councillors may recall last year we centralised the sponsorship process for council just so that we could have some visibility and consistency throughout the organisation. So rather than having each group dealing with sponsorship, we brought it together under our group. But notwithstanding, it's still the individual operational areas that have been heavily involved in the process. So we have a couple of support officers in the room to support Anthony with his first committee meeting this morning. But I'm happy to hand over to Anthony for some comments.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. So the proposal in front of you is for sponsorship for Meat Stock 2025. Some of you, I believe, have attended the event in the past, which has been highly successful. So the event certainly has strategic alignment with the Toowoomba Region Tourism and Event Strategy and the Southern Queensland Country Destination Tourism Plan. It also, in an undocumented strategy manner, has alignment with a lot of efforts that have been made recently to position the region as a protein hub nationally. So things like the very successful Tisby beef battle last week. Prior to that, good representation from the broader region in the Gardens by the Bay by beef, pork and poultry producers. 2 weeks before that, we hosted 30 international buyers, protein buyers in the region, visiting a number of the feedlots. So the bigger context is that positioning of the region as a protein supplier. There's directly measurable economic benefits. So the 2024 event attracted almost 24,000 attendees. As you can see in that report, nearly 83% came from outside the region. So that equated to an average night, so 1.8 nights, so approximately 25,000 night stays, which translates to about $4.5 million to the economy. Just quickly, historically, the inaugural event was in 22. $50,000 sponsorship was contributed by the Toowoomba Regional Council at that time to help attract the event to the region. In 23, $15,000 was committed to the event. I believe at the time there was discussion around that being 30 spread over 2 years and 15 allocated for 23. In 24, we're not sure why, but the event organiser didn't request sponsorship, so there was no sponsorship provided to that event in 24. And then the panel that met, predating my starting with the council, believed that $25,000 was a fair amount to put forward to the council for consideration. I think that's probably an appropriate summary. I'll open it up for questions if there are any through the chair.
Thanks, Anthony. Just councillors as well, so just something to keep in mind with this as well. So this report does have a confidential attachment. So, so if there's any discussion that you wish to have regarding attachment 3, we do need to close the meeting to the public. If you have questions that don't relate to that particular attachment, then we do not need to close. So just keep that in mind in regards to questions. So, but I'll open it to the floor. Are there any questions from councillors in regards to this item? Councillor McMahon.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. A few questions actually. So you did explain it, but I find it interesting that the first year we gave them 50 and 15, then they didn't ask for anything. Now they're asking for 50 and we're saying 25. So I suppose my question is this. This is good for our region, right? We cement ourselves as the beef or the meat capital. I'm not going to say beef, I'm going to say meat, sorry. We attract 82% outside visitors and we get a whole bunch of bed nights out of it. I think this is within council's scope and strategic alignment, as you said. if I take you to attachment 1, and it's where we show all of the socials and the content and the output for that, and if we could bring that up on the screen. So it's attachment 1, that page. I did notice that we're, well, some cases less than half, but kind of in line with Bendigo Sydney, but we're not getting really the same interaction, really, that I think. And if it puts us on the map and there's 100,000 people saying meat stock Toowoomba, I think that's a really good thing. So it is a question to you. Is it in the scope of this council to say, we'll give you the full 50 grand if those numbers can pick up?
I think it's a very worthwhile question to ask, absolutely. I think that we need to be driving every way possible the exposure and the return on investment from the event. So we can certainly ask that question. We can better understand how much they understand why perhaps we are getting that lesser exposure than some of the other locations it's held. I also think that in the sponsorship agreement, there's an opportunity to try and build profile of our local producers as well, and absolutely do what we can do to capitalise on any of our local producers, the Morton Co's, the Jim's Jerky and so on, that might be contributing to this event, and leverage that element as well.
Yeah, so when we talk about sponsorship, my reading of the policy is that anything over $10,000 has to come to council. So there's no issue with us as a council. Is there a matrix criteria that says 25 or 50, or that's an officer recommendation? And are we going over the top of a matrix or a decision policy from changing it to 25, 50, or is that just an officer recommendation?
My understanding is that there's no matrix as such. It's that $9,000 amount that kicks it up into council consideration. But
so anything over 10,000.
Andrew, I might defer to Andrew Willpass, my colleague, who was actually on that panel, to comment on that.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony, and good morning, councillors. With the assessment of a sponsorship proposal, the panel doesn't have a matrix or scoring matrix to provide guidance. Basically, what we're looking at is, I guess, the request and trying to make an assessment on what's provided, including a consideration of available budget for the sponsorship funding that we have available to use for that financial year. So as you've suggested, anything over $10,000 needs to come to council. So the recommendation of the panel for this time was 25, based on a few factors, which included the initial year that the event was supported, where $50,000 was provided. However, the intent at that time was to reduce council's investment to 25 by sourcing other funds or other sources of investment. So in that regard, it was felt, well, that 25 is probably that good figure to recommend. However, it certainly is council's decision as to determine the level of sponsorship to be provided.
Thanks for that. Could I ask one more question, and I'm happy to let my colleagues have a go. I noticed is it 3 days to 2 days this year, 25 coming, so that's less operating costs for them, yeah? Yeah, nodding, good.
Yes, well, I guess that was included in that confidential attachment.
It does say 3 to 2 in there.
It has certainly, sorry, yes, it certainly has gone from 3 to 2 days, yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McMahon. Councillor Shine.
Thanks, Chair. Just trying to think back a few years when the first one came along, I think the feeling was that we'd give it a go with the 50,000, seemed like a good idea, and see if it was supported in subsequent years that could ultimately stand on its own feet. The fact that they didn't apply last year might have indicated that had already reached at that stage. When I say last year, I mean this year. And I haven't come across where they've given us, if they have to or want to, a summary of their expenses and income for this event as to whether it was profitable. If it was profitable, I'm just wondering, is it really something that council should be continuing to put money towards if it can in fact stand on its own 2 feet?
I would imagine profitable or not. I mean, from past experiences and previous organisations, event organisers seeking sponsorship will continue to seek sponsorship regardless. Because they never know what discrepancies come up, what unpredicted costs come up. We believe that the reason for not requesting funding for the 2024 event was a discrepancy on their part, thinking that we believe that they thought they might have already done that in the previous year, which would explain why they didn't. But we can't substantiate that.
Thanks, Councillor Shine. Mayor McDonald.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Chair. I do actually have a couple of questions that probably does relate to the confidential. So I'd be comfortable to move into confidential just to discuss
Okay,
a few things.
So we've got a motion there to go into confidential, moved by Mayor McDonald, seconded by Deputy Mayor Rebecca Von Hoff. All those in favour? That's carried. So we will go into confidential. So Thanks, Councillor. So we will resume the Corporate Services Committee for the month of October. So we're at item 4, which is a request for sponsorship Meat Stock Toowoomba 2025. So the recommendation is that Council commit to sponsoring Meat Stock Toowoomba 2025 in the order of $25,000, subject to Fat Apple Event Co Pty Ltd aligning with Council's relevant strategies and procurement policy with regard to local content and brand marketing. And 2, a sponsorship agreement relating to Meat Stock Toowoomba 2025 be negotiated with Fat Apple Event Co Pty Ltd and executed by the Chief Executive Officer or delegate, subject to Part 1 being satisfied. So that is the motion, moved by Mayor McDonald, seconded by Councillor Von Hoff. Anyone wish to go into debate? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? That's those against? So that's carried. So, councillors, we move to the next item on the agenda, which is item number 5, and this being the quote or tender consideration plan access to standards. And the author of this report is Andrew Wegener.
Good morning again, councillors, and thank you, Chair. So this request is to request Council to consider the preparation and adoption of a quote or tender consideration plan in compliance with Section 230 of the Local Government Regulation to support access to standards from various publishers. At attachment 1, there's a table of involved parties for consideration. So the intent behind this for access to standards is they provide guidelines to help ensure products, services and systems are safe, consistent and reliable. And the plan is designed to provide Council with the ability to continue engagement. This plan is to provide the compliant framework which Council may continue to provide access to the standards. And I'll hand over to questions.
Thanks, Andrew. Any questions, councillors, in regards to this particular item? Mayor?
No questions. Thank you for the report, Andrew. I'm happy to move it.
So I've got a mover of the motion, seconded by Councillor McMahon. Anyone wishing to go into debate? So just the motion is that Council adopt the quote or tender consideration plan access to standards, and 2, that note the plan will be internally reviewed on an annual basis and only represented to Council where there are proposed changes as a result of the review or otherwise. We have a mover and a seconder with no reason to go into debate. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Absolutely. Thanks, Andrew. Councillors, we go to the next item on the agenda, so item number 6. This one is the customer experience strategy. So Anne Carl, the author, but Brendan Steiner will present. So I'll hand across to you. Thank you, Brendan.
Yeah, thank you. Anne's unwell today, so she said she can't be here, but I'd like to thank her and her team, including Zane, for the amount of time and effort they put into this. They put a lot of care, a lot of love. As part of that process, they met with over 100 staff members. That included CLT, councillors. We've taken all that feedback, we've gathered it, collated it, put into the strategy that you see before you that's for endorsement today.
Thank you, Brendan. Any questions, councillors, in regards to this particular item? Mayor McDonald?
I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to commend the work of Anne, Zane, and everyone else involved in this. We've come a fair distance in regard to communication and the way we do work with customers, and this is the next iteration of this. We can always look at improvement, and we'll continue to do that. But I think this strategy does demonstrate clearly, and this is about culture as much as it is about anything else. The willingness to work with customers, whether they're external or internal, and understanding that they themselves have only made contact because they're trying to find a solution to something. And I think this actually demonstrates that we are willing to do that. Flagging, of course, that not always the information that our customer service team have to impart is good news. not always does that happen. And therefore the efforts of our customer team at all of our service centres, whether they're in person or online or indeed on telephone, is to be commended. And for the 98% of those that are out there that have recorded a high satisfaction of the service that's being provided, it's full credit to you and your team, Zane and Anne. But I just wanted to publicly acknowledge that for this council, this term, it's another phase of us working closely with community, and therefore this is a critical part of that culture change and what we're doing. So I want to commend the report, and I'm happy to move it if there's no other questions.
Thanks, Mayor. So I've got a mover of the motion. Councillor Carl, did you have a question? I just was happy to second it. So if there aren't any further questions in relation to this, I just probably want to endorse probably the words that the Mayor said, and probably just add to that this is a really, really important strategy for not only this council, but obviously for this community. So when you break it down, Toowoomba Regional Council, I mean, it's a service delivery organisation, and with that being it's the service that's delivered to the constituents being the customers, if you will. So it's about that experience and how we best engage with our customers, but also it's of equal importance as well is how that strategy is put in place that supports the staff internally as well. So it's both internal and external. But again, I commend the work of the team, and this is just certainly a work in progress. And I think also for the community, it's a clear sign that at this point in time, this council wants to improve the experience of the customer, both internally and externally, and that is something that obviously takes a whole body of work, and a lot of time and effort has gone into this and research, and it's a big thank you to everyone that has contributed towards it as well. So we look forward to obviously the next steps with this, and ultimately seeing an improvement in that customer experience, so both internal and external with TRC. So with that, so I have a mover in Mayor McDonald, a seconder in Councillor Carl. If there's no reason to go into debate in regards to this item, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thanks, Brendan. Thanks, Zane. So that's it. Thanks, Anne-Marie. So, councillors, with that, I will close the Corporate Services Committee meeting for the month of October. I think I'm handing across to the Mayor for Economic Development.
Okay, thank you, Dan, very much indeed, and thank you for all your efforts yesterday and today as well. Your first time as an operator and committee, so thank you very much. Do appreciate it. Councillors, the councillor appointed to chair this meeting is Councillor Edwina Farquhar. She's on leave today. She's absent today, and we'll note that shortly. As per standing orders as mayor, and given there are no substantive items for decision, I'll continue and just chair this meeting as we work through it. So, councillors, welcome. Welcome to Deputy Mayor Councillor Rebecca Von Hoff, councillors, our acting CEO Nick, and all of those in the room and those watching online. We do appreciate your attendance for the Economic Development Committee for October. This meeting is obviously being live streamed as well, as I've mentioned. Our opening of the meeting begins with the acknowledgement of Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, the Guyabul and Djarowa peoples, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's first people. I just wanted to make note of that too. Councillors will have seen some imagery at Singapore Gardens by the Bay of a great example of a local First Nations person doing some fine art that's on display internationally. A yarning circle, totem poles, and also a depiction of our native flora and fauna and Indigenous heritage with a gene stream tree, which you will have seen as well. So just acknowledging that fine work. We do have an apology from Councillor Carol Taylor that we need to receive. So Councillor Rebecca, Councillor James. Moved by Councillor Rebecca, seconded by Councillor James. Those in favour? Motion's carried. Councillor Edwina Farquhar, I've mentioned earlier, we need also a motion for Councillor Edwina's apology. If someone moves that, moved by Councillor Trevor, seconded by Councillor Gary. Those in favour? Motion's carried unanimously. Noting also the leave of absence for Councillor Melissa Taylor. There are no items submitted for the consideration of the Economic Development Committee, and therefore councillors will close the meeting at 11:15.5. Thank you.